Thank you. And thank you for the introduction. So, the topic of this talk is the philosophical heart. And I wanted to start out with returning to the keynote. Let the group life be inspired by the rules for initiation. Know, express, reveal, destroy, resurrect. This conference keynote has a musical quality and a first-rate tonality. The same can be said of the writings of the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. In the last productive year of Nietzsche's life, he wrote the book Götterdämmerung, or in English, Twilight of the Idols. The subtitle of this book is How to Philosophize with the Hammer. Given the lyrical force of Nietzsche's arguments, one is forgiven for thinking that he means a sledgehammer. However, with Nietzsche, the hammer metaphor should perhaps be understood more as a tuning fork. With a tuning fork which is used to strike concepts, ideas, or worshipped ideas known as idols. Upon being struck by this hammer, the truth content or emptiness of the ideas resound. We could call it the hammer of intuition. Crystallized ideas or thought forms which have outlived their usefulness sound a discordant note, which marks them for abandonment and destruction. So what are the ideas that should be abandoned? I would suggest it's any idea which has become dogmatic, crystallized, and has outlived its purpose. For us in the Arcane School, the tuning fork of intuition should also be applied to the Tibetan's ideas and concepts, as he himself emphasized, as did the Buddha. The life of the Arcane School group mind must be dynamic, continually alive and vital, and the hammer of intuition should be applied to all ideas and foundational concepts. In this way, the hammer of intuition is a fulcrum around which the group mind evolves. Know, express, reveal, destroy, and resurrect. There's a cyclical and progressive quality to the sequence, suggesting the spiral movement of evolution of consciousness. Successive ring-pass knots are developed, assumed, expressed, found to be inadequate, and abandoned in lieu of greater vehicles. Thus, the cyclical evolution of group consciousness proceeds. Turning to the Western sort of collective mind, characterized today as it is by search for meaning in the aftermath of postmodernism, lost as it is in materialistic reductionism, it's time to challenge the basic dualistic operation of the mind, or the rational mind. Now, frequently, as is also mentioned in the program, the philosopher Descartes is cited when dualism is discussed. And he should be credited with most eloquently formulating the foundation for the age of eminence of rational thought and individualistic thinking with his proposition, cogito ergo sum, as many are familiar with, means I think, therefore I am. Yet, the dualistic operation of the rational intellect did not originate with this 17th century thinker. It is, I believe, the basic operation of the rational mind to say this, not that, analyze and synthesize. In the history of philosophy, I believe we should look back at least to Plato's idealism, especially as it evolved into dualism proper by St. Augustine and other founders of Christian thought patterns, which have been so very influential in Western thinking. It is precisely these concepts, or idols as Nietzsche calls them, which he assail on behalf of the one life. The mind itself cannot release our minds, or our minds themselves cannot release our minds from identification with outlived ideas. Intuition-based truth has a ring of livingness that's wholly different from the analytic synthetic operations and the products of that, of the rational mind. In Nietzsche's words, I mistrust all systematizers and avoid them. The will to a system is a lack of integrity. Nietzsche is a proponent of the flowing, creatively expressive life, or livingness, we could say, of the Dionysian life force, or the one life as it reigns free, liberated from the restraining entanglements and dualities produced by the analytical rational mind. We can say that Nietzsche points to the intuition as the way out of the entanglements of the mind. The essential impetus is that we should move from the mind understood as intellect versus flesh to the mind experienced as living heart-mind. Now, these ideas, they may seem very abstract. However, at least for a philosopher, a more practical seed of a new philosophy can be found. And I want to introduce a Danish thinker that you may have heard, a few of you may be familiar with, Knud Ejler Løgstrup. Now, he wrote a book, it's a Danish version of it, it's called The Ethical Demand. Løgstrup set out to investigate what attitude towards other people can be inferred from the teachings in the New Testament, and how these attitudes can always be found present where we are in everyday living. Løgstrup combined elements of phenomenology, ethics, and theology, and he elucidated this fundamental ethical demand, which is always already, that's a phenomenological term for always being there or always with us. It's always already built into our life with other people. And this is the foundation for this demand. It is that trust is not something we create. It's not something that we make. It's something that is always given to us in meeting other people. And I would like to read a little bit from the text of Løgstrup. Trust is not of our own making. It is given. Our life is so constituted that it cannot be lived except as one person lays himself or herself open to another person and puts him or herself into that person's hands, either by showing or claiming trust. By our very attitude to another, we partake in shaping that person's world. Herein lies the unarticulated demand that we take care of the life which trust has placed in our hands. Now, this demand, it arises at a basic phenomenological level. That means that it arises on the very level of our being in the world, that we are continually delivered into each other's mercy. As esotericists, in esoteric terms, we could say that the demand arises from our inner voice, which is always here. The demand to spontaneously provide right response to true need is an aspect of spirit in action. Patanjali describes this as a higher siddhi, an efflorescence of discipleship training. This is thinking in the heart. The immediacy of trust is foundational in our being with others in the world. We are, hence we trust. And from this trust arises a demand to respond with helpfulness to true need. In the Tibetan's words, service is a life demonstration. It is a soul urge. Coming back to our conference keynote, let the group life be inspired by the rules for initiation. Know, express, reveal, destroy, resurrect. This concerns the life and evolution of the group mind in the meaning chitta. Now, chitta is a Sanskrit word used by Patanjali and translated by the Tibetan to denote the mind stuff. There's also another translation, I'm sure there's several, but another translation of chitta into English is mind in the meaning heart. What does mind in the meaning heart mean? And how can this seed a new philosophy? In the following, and drawing on Buddhist psychology, I suggest that mind as heart has three aspects: renunciation, clear mind, and loving kindness. Renunciation, or letting go of attachments and aversions, is a prerequisite for centering consciousness in the mind as heart. In a famous experiment from 1973, later known as the Good Samaritan study, two psychology researchers randomized seminary students. These were students that were going on to become preachers. And the researchers then varied the amount of urgency before sending these students to walk on a trip across campus from one end to the other. One group was told they were late to present a talk at the other end of campus, whereas the other group was told that they had plenty of time to reach the other side of campus and give their talk. And now, on the way across campus, the researchers had placed an actor who slouched in an alleyway, playing the role of someone in distress needing assistance. The difference between the two groups of seminary students was marked. The group who thought they were in a hurry were much less likely to stop and offer their assistance than the group who had been told they had plenty of time. This illustrates the impact of attachment and narrowing of the mind. By emphasizing urgency, the hurried subject's mind's attachment to getting somewhere grew, and their minds were narrowed to the task of getting to the other side of campus in time. Those, on the other hand, who had been primed to think they had plenty of time, had more open minds. More of these students noticed the person in distress and stopped to offer their assistance. Thus, renunciation mind is the non-attached mind. In Western psychological terms, we could say this is a less neurotic mind. Renunciation is, in simple, practical terms, being easygoing. However, there are also other aspects. We must also renounce the desire to have a specific effect, to have a plan for the other. We must continually renounce our ideas, as we've discussed throughout the day, including held beliefs that we are right and that others could be helped by taking on our ideas. Now we come to clear mind, or shunyata, or emptiness. This is one of the most difficult concepts in Buddhism and also the most misunderstood elements in Western reception of Buddhism. As esotericists, we can say that clear mind is simply perhaps the voice of the silence, which can be experienced when the chitta is stilled. It is the openness of the mind when at the high point of contemplation. The mind as heart is silent, and in this silence is the voice of silence. A voice of silence is, unsurprisingly, a paradox. It must be so, because in the mind as heart, we are beyond reason. We can only approach this state with language through paradoxical teachings such as Zen koans, or we can employ symbolism. Difficult though it is only when we realize as an experienced fact the truth of non-duality expressed as I am that am I, or we are that are we, that we can fundamentally uproot the tendency towards separateness. That brings us to the third aspect, loving kindness. Loving kindness mind is being here, being present with another living being, open, encompassing, accepting, loving, aware, and responding to the true immediate need of the other. Loving kindness mind is also the healthy mind. Being open, concerned for others' happiness leads to joy. In a way, the loving kindness mind is the only healthy mind. Loving kindness mind produces immediate and right response to true need. This response is spontaneous in that our immediate response upon meeting another is, how can I help? When we extend this impersonal love, and it should be remembered that it is an impersonal form of love, an intuited right response to true need to all beings, we become one with all beings. The methods are love and identification, and the vehicle is consciousness. We love, therefore we are one, or we love, therefore we are. And I wanted to just read a small piece by a writer called Guillen Kumar that puts this in perhaps more eloquent phrasing. When the love within you is experienced as truly impersonal, directed at everyone rather than just a few, then this love fuses with the love which is the fabric of our universe. Love is the energy which fuses all as one. When love is impersonal and effortless, the lover, loving the loved, becomes the energy of love as one and God. This brings us back to some of my concluding remarks, which is signs that we're moving towards an age based on this new proposition, we love, therefore we are. I have a couple of suggestions only. One of them is mindfulness. In recent years, we have noticed that mindfulness practice has become widespread in the West, far from just a fringe phenomenon. Mindfulness training can now be found in kindergartens, prisons, phone applications, and business schools. In mainstream psychotherapy, we also now have so-called third-wave cognitive therapy, which is getting more and more widespread, and which employs mindfulness practice as a cornerstone in the treatment of disorders such as anxiety and depression. This is a positive development in line with the evolutionary plan. Mindfulness practice, with its intentional focus on the here and now, constitutes a step towards alignment with the mind as heart. So in summary, I would say that the new philosophy of the mind as heart will be defined by openness, clarity, practicality, and an easygoingness that offsets the current more neurotic Western mind. This necessitates continuous renunciation and reevaluation of the values we live by. I also believe we must continually employ the hammer of intuition. And the guiding proposition shall be, we love, therefore we are. Thank you.